Well, today we are blessed to have Jonathan Moody. And Jonathan, as you just heard, is the president and CEO of Moody Nolan. And he's going to talk to us about a whole lot of really neat things going on in the city. He asked for an interview style thing. We've done this a few times. So I have a series of questions to ask him. And then at the end, we'll allow some time for audience questions as well. But why don't we start off? I'm going to hand the microphone to Jonathan, and you can just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And it's weird, it's like they're staring at me online right there. But yeah, it's good to be here. So born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. I told someone else that I'm not the Moody, at least I don't believe that everybody thinks of immediately. My dad started the company this year 40 years ago now, and I'd say that I had the unique experience of growing up with the company. So I grew up here in Columbus. I went away to architecture school at Cornell University, and then I went to UCLA for grad school. So I'm happily to be a member of a Big Ten school now. I lived and worked in Los Angeles for about 4 or 5 years, and then I met my wife, who I think many of you know as well from Columbus Metropolitan Club. And I moved back here to Columbus. It's been 11 years. It's hard to believe. And the best way I could describe that experience is like drinking from a fire hose from the last 11 years. And here we are today, magically. Is that fair?
Tell us, what does Moody Nolan do?
Okay, yeah, so we are an A-only architecture firm. So my father and Howard Nolan, who fortunately passed away in 2011, Howard was a structural engineer. We used to be an AE firm, but since then we split off the engineering component of our work into a separate business that my brother actually runs. So Moody Engineering is a separate company, but we are architects. We design and execute buildings. I know that legally I'm supposed to say that we're responsible for contract documents that are, really execute the design intent of a building. And the way I think about that is a lot of people have ideas, and I always think that it starts and ends with people. Like people, have an idea for how you would come together in a space like this. And my job as an architect is to translate that into a physical manifestation of that, or help work with you on that. And at the end of the day, it's coming back to the people of how do you experience and think about things like tile and lighting and sound and all those things. But it begins and ends with a translation of how you think about people and space.
I guess I forgot to have you tell us about the Moody Household. There's
Yes.
wife, and then are there any other creatures at the house?
Yeah, so I make the joke, and everybody thinks I'm exaggerating, but I am not. That part of that story 11 years ago. So 11 years ago, about that time, a little over, I proposed to my wife. While we were living in Los Angeles, and then I moved here, and then we got married, and then my son was born 40 weeks exactly from my wedding. Like, it sounds like an exaggeration. I'm like, no, like you can look it up. 40 weeks exactly from our wedding. He's one of the 5% of kids that are born on their due date, and it's 40 weeks exactly. So life happened fast between I bought a house, I got married, I had a kid, my son's 9, and then my daughter is 6, she'll turn 7 here in a couple months. So the other parts, on my growing up here side, I have 2 older brothers. My oldest brother, Curtis Jr., is in the military, and my middle brother's an engineer.
Nice. Well, Moody Nolan has been responsible for a lot of cool things around the country, around Ohio, but we're Columbus Rotary. We'd love to hear, what are you responsible for as far as what we see when we drive around this town?
Yeah, so we make a joke. I mean, maybe it's a little bit confident, but we've run into some scenarios. Like I remember one, we were working on the Driving Park Recreation Center. And it was the city put out an RFP saying they want to renovate the rec center, and the old building was built in the 80s and needed some work and needed an addition, and we were going around and around with our internal team trying to figure out if we knew who had done the original building. And then all of a sudden my dad attended one of the buildings, and he was like, one of the meetings, and he was like, we did. we did the original building. So the joke that we have is like, more often than not, given, city, public schools, libraries, we likely have a connection with it or some kind of affiliation with it. But we've done a number of things at Ohio State. So for example, we were part of the original Woody Hayes team doing the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. We worked on the new Wexner Medical, not the new one, the slightly older Wexner Medical Center. Basketball arena. My dad, being a former athlete, that was a huge deal, and there's probably a whole story about Ohio State's basketball arena. RPAC, the rec center, the Ohio State Student Union. We've probably done, I'd say, in the teens of libraries in and around Columbus, like things like the renovation addition of East High School, Poindexter Village. I could keep going. Ohio Health Office buildings, number of healthcare projects. I think our biggest markets are higher ed, healthcare, housing, all different sorts, student, affordable apartment buildings. We actually even have, like, our first project was a church project. So I'm sitting here looking around at a number of, family life centers or the basements of like these types of projects. I'm going to pause there because I'm going to keep going. So,
And you have an office in New York, Nashville, anywhere else?
we have 12 offices around the country.
Gosh. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a story to that. I think it's been a part of our history and growth that is an exciting reality that is Columbus right now. I think one of the things we talk about a lot is our balancing the big city versus small town. We're working on a library project. We did the Martin Luther King Library here, and we're doing one in Milwaukee. And in my mind, like, Milwaukee's a big city, right? Like, hey, they got a baseball team and they got a basketball team, and then like we get there and we start going around, and I'm like, and I looked up the demographics, and I'm like, Milwaukee's a town of like 500,000 or 600,000 people, but part of what we've seen, our growth as a firm really reflects Columbus's, is that we kind of have this, we don't realize it until we sit back and look, that we're as big, as competitive, usually bigger, usually more competitive than a lot of peer cities that we don't think about as peer cities. There were, and so for us, where it starts, like if you look at our Nashville office, which has been around 25 years, healthcare projects in and around Central Ohio, and a firm that we partner with for healthcare work, and they do, national healthcare work, and they said, hey, it'd be great for us to have a presence to partner both for here and in Nashville. And basically we said, well, if we're doing work in Nashville, let's open an office, and we continue to do work in Nashville and continue to grow, and just little by little. And then if you look at, so we've been in Nashville for 25 years, and then had an opportunity to do the convention center at Nashville. We partnered with a firm there, and then that firm said, we really like that convention center. New York needs a convention center, so we pursued that, and then before you know it, we're doing Jacob Javits Convention Center, which is, I think, 1.6 billion at the time, the Javits Center in New York. But literally every office that we have has a story like that, where we've started as hey, there's some little opportunity that's grown into something, and could we have an office? And then before you know it, we've got 28 people in New York, and 20 in Nashville, and 20 in Chicago, and times 9 other locations, including that.
So you're part of a second generation family business. I have some familiarity with family business as well.
I guess,
I have my own stories of succession. I'm sure you do. Tell us, how did that go? Dad is still alive, still working.
Yeah.
That can be good, that can be bad. Tell us about that.
It's been great so far. I think that, like, for example, I think he was on 3 different meetings I was on, even though he's on vacation today in Florida. But he could still call. I think that's been one of the virtual meetings have been a ultimate flexibility for him to be wherever he wants and still stay involved in things. But we'd been talking about transition for a long time, and I didn't quite realize it until the questions would come up about transition planning and what it means. And the thing that I talked to a lot of people who are considering business transition and especially family business and that kind of thing. But a lot of the conversation that we've had is that it wasn't a one day we kind of said, all right, in 5 years we're going to do this. It was more like, I mean, it sounds like an exaggeration, but over 20 years, this is what this could look like. And if that could look like that, like while I'm in grad school, the idea of like, hey, taking over a business or working through business, it might be good to take a few business classes or take a real estate development course or consider these types of things. For whatever reasons we're leading into, were conversations we've been having for 15 or 20 years. And then, when I joined the firm, it was like hey, I'm starting at this position, but I need to sit into this or that in the event that one day, I get involved in other things. And what it really translated to is a lot of whether I'm ready or not to participate or lead a meeting, I'm going, and I'm going to participate and lead the meeting, nice. Whether I'm ready or not. And I think he and I have been very fortunate that our personalities align really well and that we can have very frank and direct conversations. And I do think one of the things that's been key for us, I still remember, I don't know if you had the same issue, but when I first started, one of the biggest questions I had to ask, or that I got asked, was what am I going to call my dad at work? And how do I? But it was a pivotal moment because for me and for us, because it really set the tone. Was at the end of the day, at the beginning, he's my dad first. So he's not Kurt, he's not Mr. Moody, he's my dad. So I refer to him as such, and it kind of set the tone for how we conduct ourselves.
I love that. I know people that call their dad by his first name at work, and that just has always been weird to me. He's my dad, and what I love it is I have an uncle. And I had a grandpa and I had a great uncle in the other generations, and I used to call my great uncle Uncle Bob, and all of our staff called him Uncle Bob too, which was kind of fun because he was 90 years old and everyone else wasn't.
I'm still the only one that calls him dad.
Well, and your firm last year won a national award from the AIA.
Yeah.
What was that award?
Yeah, so
that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still. It's such a big thing that I'm still not sure how to process, I think. And we just had finally, about a month ago, we had the first time we've had our national conference for the American Institute of Architects in 3 years. And so we actually got to celebrate, and shake hands and kind of recognize award winners. It's the firm award, which basically recognizes a career of firm service and efforts. It's a national award. There's only one each year, and I think, there were a series of, big important letters and plaques things sit in the mail, but it didn't hit home to me. At the professional headquarters in DC, they have a tablet, like literally, like out of almost like biblical, like stone tablet in the DC headquarters, that they etch each year. They etch the name. That's when it was like, when you see 2021 Moody Nolan, it was like, whoa.
That's really great.
This is a big deal.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. So as you've grown and you are president of the company, do you get to do any architecture anymore, or is that like, I might get to look at some plans, but I got hundreds of people to manage and offices and all the headaches that being a president has?
Yeah, so the irony is, and today's an example of it as well. I said that I think feels like most of my job isn't doing much work, it's just telling people about work we do. I don't know, I think a lot about it. I remember in grad school, there's a architectural critic who talked about her influence on the profession, not necessarily by doing the work, but by helping facilitate. And I played offensive line in college and football. I'm big on kind of moving obstacles, and that feels like a big.
Sounds like an offensive lineman.
Yeah, but it seems like a big part of it's to tell people about what we do. And then it's, I see teams and opportunities, like for example, if there's a big project coming up or an opportunity we need to pursue, it's kind of what are the things I need to move out of the way so that the team can be successful, seems like a big part of the job. And then I still try to work on at least one project.
Yeah.
So I joke, but that's, actually do what I went to school to do, which is design buildings. I work on one, but they don't let me do much.
Well, I was telling my wife last night that we were doing this, and we got to have dinner together a while ago, and she thinks Jonathan and his wife are super cool. And she said, I got to do this with a woman when she worked at Time Warner Cable, and she was interviewing the CEO of Time Warner Cable for all these people, and she said, I could tell I was losing half the audience about halfway through. We're about halfway through, so she said she looked at the woman that's the CEO of Time Warner and said, do you have a tattoo? And it got everyone back engaged. So since she might watch this on YouTube, do you have a tattoo?
I do, and the funny thing is I remember...
it's not on the script. I didn't tell you I was going to do this.
Well, but I think they reflect a lot. Actually, they're probably good talking points too. I think the biggest debate is whether or not it's 1, 2, or 4, my wife would say. Because it's basically, it's 4 different scriptures, and they are different things on different arms, and I kind of put them here as kind of, not like a big obviously not big it's not a face tattoo or something.
Yeah.
But it's something that like I could see and that I could reflect on, but the ones on this side are really about fear and how to, constantly be aware and how to address fear. And then the ones on this side are about love and passion and to kind of make sure I'm not focused so much on this stuff and more on this stuff. So for Colossians 3:23, whatsoever you do, work at it heartily as working for the Lord and not men.
Nice.
But,
wow, thank you. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
My other choice was Coke or Pepsi. I went with the tattoo one. So we have in Columbus and probably in other places what they're calling a housing crisis. And tell me what your thoughts are on that. What's Moody Nolan doing to help with that issue?
Wow, it's a broad topic. So I think at a high level, I think if you listen to demographic statements, all that kind of stuff, we're a growing city. And I think now that we have the 2020 census data, a lot of our assumptions about where our growth was headed is kind of more clear in terms of being able to track points. And right now we build somewhere in the neighborhood of 13,000 units per year. And in order to even come close to what we need to build more on the order of 17 to 20,000 units a year. And the problem is, with everything happening around the world, just, prices of things, supply chain, I think where it hit home for me, Adam, I was talking to Adam Lewin, and I think the idea that it could take somewhere in 30-some weeks to order a garage door, and the idea that if you're thinking of building a new home, you should order a garage door now if you're thinking about it. But it reflects the challenge of I don't know how to articulate the urgency in a way that's not alarming. And because one of the things I see, like when you visit other cities, you work in other places, I see the issues that they have. And I'm like, we don't have that, and we don't want those issues. So it's how do we talk about it in a way that people really understand that what seems like a great thing in terms of our home values, personal home values, et cetera, right now, it's going to become a serious problem in the next, I used to say 3 to 5, it might be 2 to 3 years at this point. But we can't build enough housing of all sorts fast enough. And it really does have to be looked at as not an us or them, but a we and an our problem, because we need as much as we can get wherever we can get it everywhere as quickly as possible. Maybe the close to home example was I remember we had a softball team when I lived and worked in Los Angeles, and my wife is from Los Angeles. We were out visiting my mother-in-law, and I remember the softball, we were driving near the area where our softball team used to play. It's a big open park, not huge, but I'd say maybe the size of, was it Schiller Park that's around here? And I was excited as we were driving near it to tell my kids, hey, that's where Daddy used to play softball. And we got there, and every 6 feet, there was a tent. And it was, we talk a lot about some of the things, I think there was an article, but maybe a month ago about, say, some of the housing challenges around, just call it homelessness on the Near East Side or not even Near East, I think it was Far East Side of Columbus, but you're seeing the beginnings of some of these things that are big problems other places, and I think we all have to, ask the question, maybe me emotional because I'm an architect and do a lot of building, how do we make, how can we address it and not how are they addressing it? Because pretty quickly it will become a problem for all of us if we're not careful. Okay.
Well, obviously we've had some big news recently that Intel is going to be coming to town. Are you a part of that at all?
I'm not right now and not supposed to say anything more than that, I believe. Well, I will tell you what I told our staff, which is and this is a part of the Intel as being a we problem and not, well, I don't want to use the word problem. A we opportunity and not a they or them. Like, oh my gosh, how are they going to build all that stuff? It's like, no, how are we going to address all of this? But so we are, the largest architecture firm in Ohio. So we know that we have a unique responsibility to say, as Columbus, the city and the region grows to accept what they're saying is 7,000 new construction jobs, we will have to grow and stretch to accommodate that as well. And I think for me, where it really hit home is I remember thinking when the Javits project in New York, so I think we started that in 2017, and it was $1.6 billion. And I remember being in New York, and there was an article about the 10 biggest projects in New York, and I was thinking, oh man, like where's Javits on the list? And Javits didn't show up on the list, right? But because in a city like New York, you see billion-dollar projects all the time. And I remember there was an article maybe 3 years ago about all the construction in downtown Columbus being, $1 billion of construction, or I think it was $2 billion, and how big a deal that was. And thinking about how disruptive to the market it would be to say, on top of the $2 billion of construction in downtown Columbus, if you add another billion or $2 billion project, that would really change the construction market. And I still don't think we have quite processed as a region that this one project, the first phase, is 20 billion. Like, again, a couple billions. I think the Wexners and the Nationwides and the Ohio Health, they tend to disrupt or be 800-pound gorillas in the market. And it's like, this is 20. So how are we gonna?
I like how you said phase one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How about the airport?
Yeah.
Are you involved in the airport?
Yeah. So I'm allowed to talk about that now. Like very lightly, very loosely. So it'll be, when you look at our needs from a region, and look at, I think when you look out kind of extreme cases of Columbus being an order of a $3 million resident population, kind of out to 2040, 2050, it's beyond time for us to have a new terminal. And I think one of the things we laugh about, technically right now it's 3 terminals, right? And we think of it as one, but it's like if you're flying Delta, if you're flying American, if you're flying Southwest, and please do not go through the Delta checkpoint. If you got a Southwest flight, but I think the idea of one terminal that's new is an exciting thing. I think we got like a 3 to 5 year construction period, and we're starting conceptual efforts on it now. We're teamed with a firm that we do a lot of aviation work with, like we're doing LaGuardia in New York with Gensler, but we're teamed with them here. But it'll be, I accept the blame right now that when you hate all the construction at the airport, I will be a part of that, but I think that's a good thing. But I think it's 1.6 billion all in for the airport.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dana, how much time do we have?
10 more minutes.
Okay. I want to allow some time for the audience. I told you we wouldn't even get through this. I'm not even halfway done. I have a pretty strong opinion about the future of workspace. And some people that I've talked to, we're in YPO together, and we've talked to a lot of these people that have good opinions, and the opinions are all over the place.
Yeah.
What is your opinion about the future of work in an office versus, what's that mean for our industries?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One of the things we're fortunate to be a part of what they call AIA's Large Firm Roundtable, which is 60 to 70 of the largest firms in the AIA. We get together, I think, quarterly. So we had a virtual meeting last week, and one of the jokes from the meeting that I thought was actually very telling is we're all in the midst, or many of the companies are in the midst of, crafting a flex work policy or flex, And so one of the questions that came up was, do you actually have to have a policy? And I think the answer turns out to be yes. And then most companies are in the 2 to 3 days a week they're going to ask people to be in. But the joke was that we don't need, everybody's got staffing challenges, right, in terms of fighting and recruiting people. But we said that if more firms would require 5 days a week, we wouldn't need recruiters. Because what we're seeing is like a lot, at least in our field, a lot of companies that are being really drawing hard lines, that there's kind of a mass exodus afterward. And the few things that I know that I've seen that are realities is, first of all, the market's been disrupted. And I think one of the key factors of why there was alignment or agreement that most companies need a flex leave policy was about recruiting and retention, and that more and more people in job interviews, and like on the spot, they'll ask, how many days, like, do you have a policy? Do you have a strategy, or what are you doing? So I think companies are being asked directly, and people are either coming or going from companies based on the flexibility that you have. And from a real estate perspective, there's a unique thing about, like, if you do kind of a 6-foot diameter circle, the space you need to house each individual is about the same metric, in terms of when we lay out office buildings, the square footage per employee, it's about the same. So I think one of the things I hope people would know is whether people are in the office, out of the office, flexibly spaced, tightly spaced, the amount of square footage that you need is still about the same. So everybody is like, hey, you'll save money, or you'll save on this. It's like, not really, depending on how you do it. But I think one of the key factors in all of it is, and this is the only thing I do know confidently, is that it is an opportunity to ask the question how you can effectively work. And for a lot of companies that we're seeing, everybody's asking, is there a playbook? Is there some guide to follow? And no, because every industry is different, and they, like for me, is a lot different than an accounting firm, than would be different than a law firm, that would be completely different than a factory or a construction place. But the thing that's consistent in all of it is, right now, everybody should be asking the question, how do you want to work in the future, and open to the idea that it is probably not the way we did it from 50 years ago. The other thing too is the recognition that we don't have any data, like we all, like for our flex leave policy that's draft form, we believe it's a good thing, but we kind of have some built-in, if this doesn't work, this is what we're thinking, this is how we'll adjust the plan, because we just got to get into this concept of constantly rethinking and reimagining it, because there's a reality. Like, I mean, even today is a good example. Like, with Ohio or Franklin County going back into high exposure rate, it's like, can the plane change or adapt on the fly? So, I mean, it's a long-winded way of saying, what do I know about the future? It's not a whole lot.
I'm just curious. I was trying to figure out how to ask this question, because I know we have some retired people. How many people are going into an office 25 or more hours a week? Wow. So about half the room. Just curious. Maybe a little more. Okay. Well, last question from me. What is one piece of advice you would give to somebody coming into your industry that's starting today?
Into our industry, it would be a lot about flexibility and adaptability. I think one of the things that I still remember my boss back from when I was in LA that said is, in school you learn a lot about how to think, and when you start working, you learn how to, we want to teach you how to build. And I think if you're coming in with it means it more than ever. I think 2 or 3 years ago we would have been more focused on window details or drawing standards or different software or those types of things. But the most important thing is that you have to know how to think and how to adapt, because what we've been through the last 2 or 3 years and where we're headed going forward is the continued constantly questioning why it is we do the things the way we do. And if you're a very fixed mindset of, I want to be taught or shown this, it won't last very long, or you won't be very successful. But the people who we've seen that says, hey, I can take this and run with it, or adapt to it, or readjust to it, or rethink it, those are the people that we're searching for. We don't know how to ask it very well in job interviews, but those are the questions we're trying to figure out. Like, do you know how to think? Can you adapt? Can you adjust? Because I think we're all should be in an exciting world of being able to constantly redefine what our future is. But if you don't want that, this is not the profession for you.
Well, thank you. Questions, Carl?
Jonathan, I've got two questions for you. One, I assume you know Dan Pickett. Dan was a
Yeah.
longtime member of this club.
Oh yeah, no
Friend
doubt.
of many of us.
I think I'll see him on Saturday. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
The second question is, and you can comment on that. Second question is, are you ready to become a member of Columbus Rotary?
So, is a maybe a word? So yeah, I do know Dan. It's funny because he's in Florida now, and I'm giving. Remember, I was telling you a big part of my job is telling people about what we do. I'm giving a keynote for AIA Florida conference on Saturday, and Dan reached out and said he'd be there. I think
Nice.
so.
Millie?
I wondered, do you see that we're going to be bringing industry back to this country? Because I know China's in lockdown, and that's really affecting a lot of our supply chain.
So the question is, will industry be coming back to America?
I don't know that I can answer the industry part. I mean, but what I can answer, or at least what we're seeing so many companies. I mean, I think the exciting part of Columbus, if you look at, say, a company like Chase, pre-pandemic, we were already in this mindset of, yes, you can have employees in New York or Los Angeles or Miami or Atlanta, but the truth is, I think 24,000-ish Chase employees are here in Columbus. I think a lot more companies are looking closer at that model of, you know, is there somewhere between a large city and a completely rural environment where you can staff and execute and do what it is you do in a way that makes sense? I think in our industry specifically, I mean, we're still at such a shortage of, you know, labor, you know, from just our ability to execute projects and that's been the biggest thing about the Intel thing that I like, you know, I'm like raising my hand. How come nobody's asking this question of where 7,000 new construction workers are going to come from? And the irony is all they're coming to do is build a factory so that we can produce more things here locally. So we're seeing more and more of it, but I don't know if it's a hands down end of the thing.
Mark?
Jonathan, I want to thank you, first of all, for the houses that you do in the inner city every year that have come out and you're now doing across the country. I think it's just a wonderful, marvelous program. So thank you for that. But along in that line, in the shortage of housing coming up, have you dealt with and designed any tiny houses or looked into or see if that might have some spreadability? And
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. For us, so we actually have the second Legacy House. We actually had our fundraiser last week for Nashville because we're nearly complete with that one, and we've got a kickoff meeting for Chicago, so we'll have our third house. There's a few more under construction right now, but we go both ways. First of all, like one of the things we see, the original Legacy House was 750 square feet, and it's, if you don't know much about the construction industry, we complain a lot about like bad clients and you know, clients that are really difficult to work with and constantly change their mind and can't make decisions. Architects are the worst. Like I'm like going through designing a house, and the only other people who are critiquing it are other architects. We couldn't decide on anything. It took forever. So basically, the original Legacy House, I think, you know, a tiny home has to be under 600 square feet. It was originally a tiny home, and then after a bunch of indecision, it ended up around 750 square feet. What we've found is that by the time you know, have the basics of what you need to do in terms of site preparation and foundations, all that stuff, there really wasn't a big economic advantage in, you know, a small home versus a large one. You know, because you got to mobilize a team and all the stuff to build. So. And then the other thing we found too is I don't think the market, at least here in the Midwest, is not ready yet for, you know, as cool as it sounds to say you've got a 560 square foot home, it's not as cool as your general person that's looking for a home. What we found is that the target is somewhere between like 900 and 1,200 square feet is a good target for new homes. And there's a number of projects in terms of single family developments that if you can target that range of, you know, call it 1,000 square foot home, and figure out how to build them expediently. And like for one that really excited to see, but I don't think anybody knows exactly what it is. The old Schottenstein site being converted into
Yeah, Brad DeHaze is
Yep.
doing that whole project.
being converted into like basically a mass production of housing factory. But basically, if you could mass produce 1,000 square foot units, like that seems like the sweet spot. We've got a few call it on the books projects that we're kind of waiting to see what happens in that vein. There may or may not be another one coming here in Columbus soon.
Let's try to do two quick ones. Craig?
First of all, fellow SOBs, Mike, you and me, being son of Boston. Appreciate that. My history is very similar to yours, only in a completely different industry. We design corrugated packaging. Lots of architecture schools use corrugated as design work, as you may know, so a lot of similarities. I was speaking with my designer this morning, and his comment was, yeah, Craig, I could be working from home completely from a design standpoint. So your point is well taken. My question comes down to, I'm watching the houses, they're not being built, they're growing out Sawmill, Willows to Delaware. I'm also seeing stuff happening downtown. But the middle area where things need to be knocked down and redone. Are you seeing that in the future as being a big, a significant element, or are we still going to go towards Cleveland? And
So Craig's question is, we're re-gentrifying downtown, we're going outside 270, but what about the stuff in between?
Yeah. No, that's the biggest mystery that everybody's trying to figure out and solve. Like, and I'm saying that we're seeing some things happen that are exciting and seem to be moving in the right direction, but there's not enough data that says, you can execute this many units based on these vacancies or renovate this many homes within that middle zone as quickly as we need to. But I mean, at the end of the day, I've talked to city council members and other people about it, about like the biggest hurdle we've seen, dredging up bad memories of getting a 750 square foot home built in the Linden area that straddled 2 lots. Technically speaking, that was a violation of zoning code. And even though we're like, hey, we have the land, we have a design, we want to get it done, that hurdle was a indicator of some of the unforeseen challenges that shouldn't occur. Like, why is it so hard if somebody's got the will and the resources to make something happen? Again, we're just trying to build a home, and it was like we ran into so many hurdles that we're saying the answer needs to be more yes. We got to figure out how to get there.
I said 2 more questions, but we're out of time. Thank you, Jonathan,
Yes.
for being here.
Yeah.